Hey, welcome to Have a Chat, where I have a talk with a Spark member. In about 20 minutes, we do this quick coaching call about one issue that our Sparkle can use some insight on. So here's the thing, if one person has a question, you can be sure that others, and maybe even you, could benefit from listening in while I have a chat with a Spark member. All right, let's get her done. I am delighted to introduce Logan today, who is our Sparkle, who's got a really cool question for us. So, Logan, why don't you tell us who you are and where you work, and maybe a little bit of context before we get into the issue?
Absolutely. So my name is Logan White. I'm the manager of fundraising and community engagement at the Brant County SPCA in Brantford. We're known as the little shelter that could. So little shelter from a smaller town. And
And
today
that's in Ontario, yeah?
in Ontario, yes.
Right.
Home of Wayne Gretzky, if anyone's a hockey fan.
Nice. Okay. Yes.
But like my question today is we've got some new fundraising goals for this year. And of course, we've had to pivot because of the pandemic, and we're really trying to branch out with our sponsors. And being in a smaller town, we've had great access to, small business owners, and we have our regular sponsors who are very supportive throughout the year, but we're trying to kind of get into that bigger corporate sponsor. And would love to learn a little bit about some strategies on how to reach out to those different organizations without kind of getting lost in the everyday calls that they get. So
Okay.
we'd love some insight on that.
Awesome. Okay. So we've had a few emails back and forth. You sent me the sponsorship package that you have.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about what your sponsorship program has looked like. Have you tried to reach out to those bigger corporations at all?
We've just started, and to give people some context on what you were mentioning, we created a sponsorship package to give our sponsors a look at what our entire year and the opportunities that they have in one little package. So to make it super easy for our sponsors to get them right off at the beginning of the year. So we've run into the problem in the past where you ask a little too late and they've already spent their giving quota. So we wanted to get that off the bat. My experience reaching out to some of the bigger sponsors from that corporate angle is, okay, email this email or go through this kind of online portal where you have to fill in all this information. And a lot of times we never hear back, or I'll follow up and nothing kind of comes of it. So I know they sponsor things. I know it's done. I don't know what's the most efficient way to kind of get our voices heard.
Okay. So this is a really big question. And one that, there are some consultants who specialize in just this, right? And I'll give you the names of a couple of people you might want to check out because they've got some really good resources. Remind me to do that after. So the first thing is that I took a look at the deck at your sponsorship package. It does look really good. It's too good, though, in some respects. And what I mean by that is you don't want to start by sending a deck to a prospective sponsor because they've got all the information. There's no opportunity for discussion. And what you want to be doing is building the relationship with the sponsor. So by sending the sponsorship package out first, it's kind of like they have no reason to talk to you because they've looked at it or they haven't looked at it, right? Which is oftentimes what happens. And so your goal is really to develop a relationship with them. And there are multiple ways to do that, right? There's one-on-one, and to the degree that you want to be doing that. Unfortunately, it's COVID, and in before times we would have said go to the Chamber of Commerce events or the BIA business improvement area events, like be where your sponsors are out in the community, because part of this is about developing awareness of the organization and of you, and of just having some visibility. So there's the person to person, real life visibility, but there's also digital visibility. So what I'm really talking about is like the cultivation before you even get to asking them for any money. So digitally, are you where they are? What digital platforms are they on, and how can you be letting them know that you're around? So are you following them on the platforms that they're on? And are you commenting on their posts and retweeting them? Like, what are you doing to build all facets of a relationship? So the cultivation stage, as you can tell, it's pretty time consuming. So it's not just about knocking on the door or picking up the phone saying, hey, can we do this? It is about developing the relationship. So there's that whole cultivation stage that you want to have a strategy around. And then so Chris Bayless from Sponsorship Collective is somebody who I would recommend you check out. He talks a lot about the sponsorship process. But what you're trying to do is, when you're talking to people about sponsorship and true sponsorship, you're usually talking to them about their marketing budget, right? So it's not this is beyond just like a philanthropic gift. And so now if you're talking about true sponsorship, because I looked at your deck and there was like some $10,000 level sponsorship opportunities. Mm-hmm. That's a serious price point, and somebody's going to want to know what they're getting in return for it. So true sponsorship is really a business to business conversation. And for a business to business conversation, you need to be talking to them in a way that is going to make a business a difference for their bottom line. So I'm a small business owner. If you'd sent me that deck, I would have thought, yeah, nice. I don't do a lot of sponsorship, but when I do, I try to be really strategic. So what's important to me? And so when I'm sponsoring something, the groups that I'm working with, I want to have a conversation with them to be clear that I'm going to get something that is of value to me. And so one of the challenges for these bigger sponsorships, when you're doing kind of a, here are the things you can get, is that you're presuming that you know what I need or want for my business. So that's why the goal of, especially for the bigger ones, and we'll talk about the smaller ones in a minute, because we'll talk about the smaller ones in a minute. For the bigger ones, if you're asking somebody to invest, $5,000 or $10,000, you're going to want to be able to make the case about how that's going to support their business. So some folks may simply just want to be seen as being as supporting a community organization. I mean, you work for an animal organization, so if you know that business owners have their own pets and really love their pets, that's a great place to start. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, what's important to them? So, I remember talking to somebody who was able to secure a sponsorship because a company just wanted to be able to get in front of leaders in a particular industry, because they knew that there were decision makers and they had no other easy way to get in front of a bunch of them. So they provided a relatively, generous sponsorship in exchange for them hosting a VIP reception before an event, so that they had really, they could make really good relationships. They could develop the relationships. So it's about being able to offer up what the businesses want. So for the bigger sponsorships, you really are kind of shifting into this business to business mode. You know, I remember working with a charity that they knew that the couple hundred people who were going to participate in a special event that they did were young professionals in the Toronto area. And so they're like, okay, who cares about young professionals? And they looked sort of where this was an outdoor event and people were actually going to be walking by with canoes. So they looked around sort of that area and there was a mini dealership. And we know that there are some car brands that have different demographics, right? And so we happen to know that a lot of young professionals are the demographic for Mini. So, and you know, one of the things we know about car dealerships is that they kind of have like this numbers game. The more people they get test driving a car, the more people are going to buy cars. So for them, the pain point was we need more people in our pipeline to come in and drive cars.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to say, okay, well, we can deliver, you know, the couple hundred folks who are participating in the event, plus their friends and the donors who are giving to them. And we can give you exposure through, you know, an email and digitally, and this is how many eyeballs, and hopefully it will lead to more people coming in. And so they gave away some freebie to get people into the dealership. So we didn't presume that we knew what they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, this is all about having a conversation and understanding how your organization can be of interest to the prospective sponsor.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost like let's target our sponsors to what each event kind of relates to them and how that relationship is built. It almost sounds like on those higher levels, it would be almost better to have that conversation of, okay, well, what can we do instead of laying it out for them? That kind of, yeah.
What's important to you in your marketing approach? What is it you're trying to reach when you're marketing, right? Because especially if it's coming from a marketing budget, you need to be able to have that conversation. And I can tell you that I know organizations that, you know, start with this conversation, but they have a long-standing relationship of doing kind of the old traditional sponsorship. And the business owners are like, oh, no, we don't do that, or we don't care, and they sort of blow them off. And they had to persist to get them to a different place and have a different conversation with them. And then finally it was like, what do you care about? What is your marketing strategy? How can we help support that? And so, you know, I can think of people who work in the financial services sector who were prepared to sponsor things because it gave them an opportunity to have their awareness raised among donors who they felt were within their potential client pool. And I think we sometimes make the mistake of thinking like, so who are the industries that support us? Like, who are the food supply, who supplies food, who are your vendors? And certainly those are folks you might want to talk to, but think more broadly, like who cares about people who care about animals? And what are the demographics of your donors that you can be sort of sharing with prospective sponsors?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm excited to kind of take a look at our demographic and figure out, okay, who would make sense to market their brand to our donors. That's a really good point. I really like that.
Good. So I do have a little bit of insight into SPCAs and humane societies in Ontario. And I would suggest that you reach out to Ontario SPCA. They might have some resources for you. And then offline, we can talk some more about that.
Absolutely. Awesome.
So those are the big sponsors. But you know, for a lot of organizations, really the meat and potatoes of a sponsorship program is like the $500,000 sponsorship levels. Like you do not want to be spending that much time and energy to get a $500 sponsorship from me, right? So it's a bit of a hybrid model where the notion of the package that you put together might actually make sense if you're talking to people in the $500 or $1,000 range. I'm not going to push back and negotiate too hard if I'm giving you $500, but I am going to want to know that, you know, I'm getting some visibility. And then, you know, I hope this goes without saying, but you need to make sure that you deliver on all the things you say you're going to deliver to them. Because there's nothing more frustrating as a sponsor to show up and see that my name or my logo isn't where it was supposed to be. And that I've actually sponsored things and people have talked about competitors at the podium when I was the sponsor. So, you know, it's about being aware of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, for the lower amounts, yeah, you know, I think the kind of approach that you have is good, but I would say still start with a relationship. So don't send it out. So now here's the thing. You have sent it out to a bunch of your sponsors. So now you have an opportunity. Okay. So what do I do to redirect how that happened? So you sent it out. And so maybe now the opportunity is a follow-up call to say, hey, would really love to talk with you about some opportunities that we have. And then just even assume they've never seen the deck, because it's quite possible they never even opened the email, or
if they have opened it, it's been a little bit and they could use a refresher. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you have sent something out to them. So that's an opportunity to reach out again and just follow up.
Perfect. Yeah.
You know, you do have a lot of really good things in that package. So you don't want to, you know, have that go to waste. But I would be, I would be reconfiguring that for the smaller amounts. And then when you get a donor or a sponsor who's interested in a bigger amount, take the elements that you have of it, but customize it for what they're interested in.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic idea. Even when we got to those bigger amounts, it was like, okay, well, how do we make this worth it without knowing our sponsor? That was really a challenge to put that together. So I think that's a huge point to, okay, well, now we have this sponsor, where can we work with them to make this worth their while? So that's a fantastic point. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. And I mean, you know, sometimes when I hear things said like that, like, well, it's not that complicated, is it? At the end of the day, it really is about, you know, everybody says that our business is about relationships. And I think sponsorships are a real example of that, because it is about understanding what they care about. And, you know, for me, I had this huge aha moment once. It wasn't a sponsorship. It was long ago enough that corporations still gave out sort of corporate philanthropy. But I did have this corporate donor, and they were giving our organization quite a lot of money for what was a smallish organization. And I happened to be having a conversation with the guy who gave the money away. And he was being particularly candid and saying, you know, God, if another small charity tells me that, you know, they're going to be able to get 2,000 views of my logo on their website, I'm going to scream, because it was a big bank. I could get 2,000 views. My comms team could get 2,000 views in 30 seconds if they wanted to.
Right.
And so, and I was then equally candid and frustrated. I'm like, so we're a small charity. What can we do? And he said, well, you know, what I care about is, and he told me what he cared about, and what he cared about. He also did government work with this organization. And so I ended up sending letters to the MPs and MPPs in the jurisdictions that that we were running programs that they funded. Tell them what a great corporate citizen this organization was. I never would have known that if I hadn't had a conversation with them.
Yeah.
Because his counterpart at other organizations didn't necessarily do government relations, so they might not have the same interest.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point as we start to shift to try to get these bigger sponsors, because we are so used to those small businesses where, you know, they might just be starting out as a business. So having something like 2,000 views is a great grab for them. So I think that's a perfect shift to kind of realize, okay, this is who our sponsors were. Okay, now let's update our deck, you know, change what we need to change to be where we want our sponsors to come from as well. And then still maintaining those relationships, so those opportunities are still available for those smaller businesses, but having those options that make sense for those bigger sponsors. I think that's going to be a huge help.
Good. Now, I will say that securing and retaining those big sponsors is a lot more work, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have to be able to deliver on what they've asked for. So it does kind of push your fundraising program into a different level that requires a different level of sophistication. Mm-hmm. And when you're in a small shop, you have to look at, is the rate of return worth the additional level of time and investment that's going to be required from us? Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Any last questions? None off the top of my head. I tried to get them in while we were going. So. All right, good on you. All right, well, thank you so much for being part of Have a Chat this today. And listen, if you're watching and you have your own questions and want to be part of Have a Chat, let us know. We open it up from time to time, and send us an email or reach out to us in Spark, and let's see if we can get you on to Have a Chat. Have a great day. Thanks, you too.